The Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota performs its first face transplant. This rare operation took over 56 hours and 60 staff to pull off. Those involved practiced on cadaver heads for 3.5 years. The recipient of the new face, Andy Sandinis, had attempted suicide in 2006 and instantly regretted it. He shot off his jaw and nose, leaving him just 2 teeth left and vision problems in one eye. Sandinis said his prosthetic nose constantly fell off and he couldn't look at children without frightening them. In June 2016, after 5 months on the waiting list, the operation became possible when an organ donor fatally shot himself, making his face available for transplant. The operation was a success, and Sandinis now has a fully restored face. He must take a lifelong regimen of anti-rejection drugs, but he's regained the ability to smell, breathe, and eat as he could before. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Matt Paul.
An official watchdog in Germany has told parents to destroy a talking doll called Kayla. They say its smart technology can reveal personal data and it poses a real threat to the public. The warning was issued by the Federal Network Agency, which oversees telecommunications. According to the BBC, the UK Toy Retailers Association said Kayla, quote, offers no special risk, but experts have warned that the problem has not been fixed, and researchers say hackers can use an unsecure Bluetooth device embedded in the toy. In December 2016, the Electronic Privacy Information Centre alleged that the doll violates privacy rules, recording conversations and transmitting audio files to a remote server. Complaints have also been filed with consumer watchdogs for the European Union, France, the Netherlands, Belgium, Ireland and Norway. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Rachel Latham.
The United Nations has raised the alarm about a looming famine in Yemen. It says 7 million people in the Arab country are closer than ever to starvation.
7 million Yemenis do not know where their next meal will come from and are ever closer to starvation. In a country of 27 million people, over 17 million are currently unable to adequately feed themselves and are frequently forced to skip meals. Women and girls eat the last and least.
The UN humanitarian coordinator has expressed deep concern about the escalation of fighting between the Yemeni army and the Saudi-backed mercenaries in Yemen's west. According to Jamie McGoldrick, clashes in the coastal region impose a great cost on civilians. McGoldrick says as Yemen is dependent on food imports, the conflict is reducing the number of ships and food supplies. Last week, the UN's Children's Agency warned that Yemen is sliding deeper into a humanitarian crisis. UNICEF says over 462,000 children are suffering from acute malnutrition. Yemen has been under an embargo imposed by Saudi Arabia since the war began in 2015.
Food prices have been rapidly climbing in East Africa due to a severe drought that has left thousands of people struggling to cope with the situation. According to agricultural officials, low and unpredictable rainfall in recent months has caused substantial damage to agricultural output in many parts of the region.
It's a very, very big challenge for the country and for the region, and particularly for the Minister of Agriculture, to continue thinking that we must depend on the vagaries of nature. That can no longer work today because the climate is changing so fast.
The government says that cereal prices have reached record high in Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, South Sudan, Somalia and Ethiopia. The rising staple food prices are reportedly constraining food access for large numbers of households, raising alarms about consequences of food insecurity. Children are also allegedly going without food in many parts of the region due to failure by farmers to harvest crops as a result of poor yields caused by the severe drought.
We continue appealing to our people not to sell the little that they have harvested. Continue appealing to our people that they can work on limited irrigation so that they can have vegetables.
Cereal prices are reportedly not the only ones rising. Beans now cost 40% more in Kenya than a year earlier, while in Uganda, corn prices are now up by 75% compared to a year earlier. Drought-affected pastoral areas in East Africa are facing severer conditions, with shortage of pasture and water causing reduced body mass for hundreds of animals. Daniel Arap Moi, Press TV, Kampala, Uganda.
A leading human rights organization says the U.S. president's, quote, poisonous rhetoric has created an increasingly divisive politics in 26 that has made the world a darker place. Amnesty International said that principles of human dignity and equality had come under assault from politicians seeking election, and it zeroed in on Donald Trump. In its annual report, the rights body said the world witnessed a sharp rise in hate and fear politics last year due to rhetoric by politicians.
The main message that's coming out of our report really is that in 2016 we saw a shocking rise of the politics of fear and hate. So we had politicians across the world dividing societies, polarizing societies, scapegoating minorities, migrants, refugees. And consequence of this is that there is a complete free fall in human rights.
Amnesty also expressed regret over the government's failure to protect asylum seekers. It added that during the last year, 36 countries pushed refugees back into states that were not safe. War and conflicts in the Middle East and Africa has forced hundreds of thousands of people to leave their countries, mostly heading to Europe, seeking a better life.
On Tuesday, a group of global investors advised lawmakers in the state of Texas not to enact legislation restricting access to bathrooms for transgender people, claiming it is discriminatory and bad for business. The bill, which has been called the Texas Privacy Act, has been marked as a priority for GOP Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. According to a new survey from University of Texas, 54% of respondents believe Texans should use public restrooms based on their birth gender, as outlined in the proposed legislation. Meanwhile, a spokesman for the NFL said recently that the controversial law could hurt the state's chances of hosting another Super Bowl.
Now, Iran has held the 37th exhibition of its nuclear achievements. The country is mulling the sale of heavy water to Europe following the export of 70 tons of heavy water to the U.S. and Russia. Saman Kujuri has more.
The 37th exhibition showcases achievements in the field of enrichment, nuclear and research power plants, exploration and extraction, nuclear fuel, waste management, agriculture, and nuclear medicine. Moreover, 3 new sections have been added to the exhibition, which include IR-8 centrifuge machine, vaccine tubular centrifuge, applicable in production of recombinant drugs, and UTRS training simulators.
Following the exports of about 70 tons of heavy water to the United States and Russia, a number of European countries have asked for the purchase of Iran's heavy water. Iran is currently studying their requests.
Iranian officials say after the implementation of Iran's nuclear deal, the purity of Iran's heavy water has reached 99.99%, which is the highest level in the world. Therefore, demand for Iran's heavy water has increased.
Recently, Iran has domestically manufactured IR-8 centrifuge machines, which will boost the country's capacity to enrich uranium almost 20 times more than the existing IR-1 machines.
Moreover, on the sidelines of the exhibition, it was announced that the first type of centrifuge to be used in the oil industry will be unveiled in April 2017. The machine is the first of its kind to have been built with all cutting-edge specifications currently produced in the world.
Designing IR-8 centrifuges began almost 3 years ago, and in the past 2 weeks, its mechanical testing has come to an end, and gas injection has already started into the machine. A 1,000 megawatt power plant needs 27 tons of uranium each year. With IR-1 centrifuge machines, we could not achieve such a goal, but with the launch of IR-8, we can produce this amount of uranium.
Meanwhile, according to the deputy head of Iran's Atomic Energy Organization, the Russians are about to bring on stream 2 1,000 megawatt power plants in Bushehr. The cost of the project amounts to over $10 billion, which is seen as the biggest contract to be implemented in the history of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Saman Kujuri, Press TV, Tehran.
The leader of Iran's Islamic Revolution says that those powers that created the Zionist regime in the Middle East are trying to boost it through seeking divisions among Islamic countries.
منطقه ما که همواره پشتیبان ملت فلسطین در مبارزات آن علیه یک توطئه جهانی بوده است این روزها دستخوش ناآرامی و بحران‌های متعدد است. بحران‌های موجود در چندین کشور اسلامی منطقه موجب شده است تا حمایت از مسئله فلسطین و آرمان مقدس آزادی قدس کمرنگ شود. توجه به نتیجه این بحران‌ها به ما تفهیم می‌کند که قدرت‌های سودبرنده از آن کدامند. آنانی که رژیم صهیونیستی را در این منطقه به وجود آوردند تا از طریق تحمیل یک درگیری طولانی مدت مانع از ثبات و استقرار و پیشرفت منطقه شوند، اینک نیز در پس فتنه‌های موجود قرار دارند.
Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei has made the remarks in an address to the 6th International Conference in support of the Palestinian Intifada in Tehran. The leader noted that the continuation of resistance against Israel has created barriers against the Zionist projects in the region. Ayatollah Khamenei said that Palestine and the Palestinian resistance should be the first priority in the Islamic world. The leader hailed the recent Intifada of the Palestinian people as a new chapter in the history of the fight against the Zionist regime. He noted that supporting the Palestinians and their noble fight is a duty upon all Muslim nations and governments.
The second day of the 6th International Conference on Palestinian Intifada kicks off in the Iranian capital, Tehran. About 700 delegates from 80 countries are taking part in the conference. The two-day event aims to emphasize the importance of the Palestinian uprising against the Israeli occupation. The conference was officially launched on Tuesday with a statement from the leader of Iran's Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei. In an address to the conference, Iran's judiciary chief accused the U.S. and its Western allies of applying double standards when it comes to Israel's war crimes against Palestinians.
The issue of Palestine is a test to weigh the alleged commitment of the West to human rights values. The issue also provides us with a yardstick to see how faithful they are to the principles they are so proud of.
Sadiq Amoli Larijani also said that the U.S. continues to support Israel despite reports of war crimes committed by Tel Aviv in the region. He referred to the 2014 Israeli war on Gaza that killed over 2,000 people and injured many others in the besieged enclave. The Iranian official also called for the unity of Muslims against Israeli aggression. Iraq's parliament speaker Salam al-Jabouri also delivered a speech saying Israel has failed to abide by the UN resolutions. He said Iraq supports the establishment of a Palestinian state within the 1948 borders.
Well, author and Middle East expert Kevin Barrett, who was in Tehran to attend that conference, says a real international community needs to be built that would represent the people, not world powers.
Well, the international community really has to become an international community rather than a bunch of slaves of the wealthiest and most powerful forces in the world. And we shouldn't identify those forces entirely with the wealthy, powerful nations, because those of us who live in the United States are also essentially occupied by these same forces. So I think we need to build a real international community that represents the people of the world rather than the wealthiest corporations, the banks that create and issue most of the world's money out of nothing, the military powers and so on. These are the people who misrule the world right now, and the rest of us don't have very much of a voice, but we're getting more of a voice thanks to the internet, communications, free media.
A U.S. Navy commander becomes the 12th military official to be charged in a wide-ranging bribery case involving a Malaysian defense contractor nicknamed Fat Leonard. The Justice Department announced February 16th that Navy Commander Mario Herrera had been accused of accepting bribes from Leonard Glenn Francis, the former CEO of Singapore-based defense contractor Glenn Defense Marine Asia. Herrera allegedly accepted prostitutes, luxury trips, and $1,800 in stakes from Francis in exchange for classified information that helped his company win Navy business. U.S. officials also claim Herrera used his position in the Navy to steer ships to visit ports that Francis's company controlled. To date, 17 people, including a one-star Navy admiral, have been charged in what's known as the Fat Leonard scandal. Prosecutors say Leonard's company bilked the Navy out of $35 million. For Newsbeat Social from Washington, D.C., I'm Caitlin Mangum.
Indonesia's capital, Jakarta, is overwhelmed by flooding after almost 6 inches of rain fell in 24 hours. In East Jakarta, water stood almost 5 feet high on February 21st. Thousands of homes are flooded, schools have been closed, and many workers have been forced to stay home. The city often experiences flooding this time of year, but heavy rainfall isn't the sole contributor to annual flooding. The Guardian reported last year Jakarta is sinking from 3 centimetres per year to 20 centimetres per year in some areas. It's a result of residents extracting drinking water from shallow aquifers below the city, causing the land above it to collapse. Jakarta also has up to 13 rivers in it, which often burst their banks when monsoon season rolls around. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Rachel Latham.
5 stranded people were rescued from a homeless encampment along a creek in San Jose, California on Tuesday, and fire crews worked to rescue residents from a neighborhood inundated by water from an overflowing creek. Heavy storms have drenched Northern California, which was already swollen from storms earlier that week. Rescued residents were taken to dry land where they were rinsed off to prevent illnesses from floodwaters that included garbage and sewage. San Jose doesn't have sirens or any emergency warning system, so firefighters were going door to door to check on residents. Dry weather is expected to return to the region.
Damaging dozens of homes but causing only minor injuries, severe storms have wreaked widespread damage across parts of San Antonio. The storms have included at least 1 tornado. According to a National Weather Service survey team, either late Sunday or early Monday, a tornado struck a residential area about 5 miles north of downtown San Antonio. San Antonio Fire Department spokesman Woody Woodward says 43 homes were damaged, 3 collapsed. He says 5 minor injuries were reported in the area.
A riot in Stockholm, Sweden is grabbing headlines after President Trump's critical comments about the Scandinavian nation. Windows were smashed and cars were set ablaze in Stockholm's largely immigrant Rinkeby neighborhood. The commotion reportedly started when a crowd gathered near an arrest being made in the neighborhood. The people involved were largely unscathed. The only person reported as injured was a police officer who was hit in the arm by a rock. No protesters were injured and no arrests were made. The unrest happened a few days after Trump claimed Sweden's immigration policy was causing issues in the country.
You look at what's happening last night in Sweden. Sweden! Who would believe this? Sweden! They took in large numbers. They're having problems like they never thought possible.
Swedish officials said that's an unfair characterization. Sweden has taken in over 100,000 refugees since 2012. Its crime rate increased by about 7% over the same period, but U.S. officials say much of the increase is from computer-based fraud rather than violent crime. It's also tough to say if that trend continued last year, since 2016 crime stats aren't yet available.
The global arms trade has risen to its highest level since the Cold War, with the U.S. ranking at the top of that list. According to a new report from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute released Monday, February 20th, the United States was the largest arms exporter from 2012 to 2016, controlling a third of all exports. What's more, most of the world's arms sales come from 5 nations. The United States, Russia, China, France, and Germany represented 74% of all exports. From 2012 to 16, worldwide sales of arms were up by 8.4% compared with the previous 5 years. Nearly half of the nation's arms exports were destined for the Middle East. However, world's largest importer of major arms was India, accounting for 13% of the global total. For Newsbeat Social from Washington, D.C., I'm Caitlin Mangum.
Missouri police confirmed on Monday that nearly 100 headstones at a historic Jewish cemetery in St. Louis have been vandalized. The vandalism was reported to University City Police on Monday around 8:30 a.m. The report of the vandalism came on the same day that the White House denounced 11 bomb threats against Jewish community centers that were reported Monday morning. Security camera footage is being reviewed by police, but they have yet to call the vandalism a hate crime.